Chapter 25 of Her Love from Above. Consequences aren't fun. Charlie was surprised when the nun completely ignored his greeting, because most nuns he had encountered through the years were courteous, and if they hadn't responded to his greeting vocally, they at least acknowledged his presence. But this nun did neither. Instead, she kept her eyes looking downward and acted like he was invisible. "Look at the scar," Arden ordered while nearing Charlie's side. "Look at the scar on her neck." Charlie took a second look at her as he exited the elevator. He couldn't see her facial features, but he did notice a small scar on her neck and momentarily wondered how she had received it. "That's Madison," Arden urgently informed. "She's here to kill Johnny." Charlie was uncomfortable as he exited the building. Something felt amiss, but he wasn't sure what. He considered the past few days, which indeed had been a wild ride. Of course, it was always a wild ride being around Madison, his old nickname when referring to both Paige and Madison because they were so much alike. He chuckled at the name as he stepped around a potted plant. He couldn't wait for this vacation to end. He and Claire would return later for a real vacation, but it wouldn't include his selfish relatives. "The scar," Arden again prodded. "That was Madison. She got that scar while trying to steal your pocket knife. Remember, she fell off the kitchen counter at Haven's Rest. You're the one who patched her up." Charlie considered the rude nun. Perhaps she should reconsider her choice of career, he mused, but then he suddenly felt ashamed for judging. He didn't know what was happening in her life, so he had no right to judge her. She's still just a woman, he reminded himself. Besides, maybe she was praying. He decided that faulting her was wrong because he wasn't living in her shoes, so he continued toward his vehicle, happy to leave the matter behind. "Charlie," Arden pleaded, "you need to listen this time." Charlie pushed the unlocked button on the key fob and opened his Jeep door. He couldn't wait to finish the reading of the will and get this week over. Although, now that Paige was in police custody, it looked like the will reading might be postponed again. "Charlie, Johnny's in trouble," Arden repeated. "Go back inside." "At least I know what's in it," he told himself while thinking of the will. He started the Jeep engine and backed out of the parking space. Charlie sat in his Jeep, waiting for the light to change. This was the smallest hospital he had ever seen, but the doctors and nurses seemed competent and cared for their patients. He squinted at the sun's glare, which was so bright it was almost blinding. Suddenly, just as the light turned green, something bounced off his windshield, startling him. A bird, he instantly thought, glancing in the rearview mirror. When he noticed that no one was behind him, he pulled to the side of the driveway and shifted the Jeep into park. He got out and rounded the front end in search of the bird, and sure enough, a robin was flapping around on the ground. He bent down, picked up the injured bird, and cradled it in his hands. "Don't blame me," he told the robin. "You did this to yourself." He walked forward and examined his windshield, only then noticing a slight smear where the bird hit. "I wouldn't have been happy if you'd broken my windshield," he said. "They're a hassle to get fixed." He examined the robin closer as he moved toward a grassy area near the parking lot. "I'm not a vet," he informed, "so I don't know if you broke any bones, but you'll never make it on the road." He bent down and placed the bird in a thick patch of grass. The robin straightened, jumped twice, squawked at Charlie, then flew up and landed on a nearby branch. Charlie tilted his head as he studied the robin, whose nest was only a few feet higher. "I guess that answers the broken bone question," he quipped with a grin. "Look at that vehicle," Arden urged. This was his final chance. Once Charlie left the hospital parking area, it would be too late. Ava would be on her own. She was strong from years of work, but Madison was several inches taller and at least 40 pounds heavier. When Charlie turned to head back to his Jeep, he caught sight of a vehicle he recognized. "Yes," Arden said, "it's her." "No," he softly moaned. "Yes," the angelic guardian urged. "That's Johnny's Impala. Madison left in it. She is the nun. Remember the scar? That was Madison's scar." "The scar!" Charlie panicked. He didn't know Johnny's license plate number, and there were plenty of white Impalas, but he had no doubt. That was the same scar Madison had carried for years, and it would explain why the nun was so rude. He turned and ran back to his Jeep, nearly stumbling as he circled the hood. When he shifted the vehicle into drive, he started to flip a U-turn at the entrance of the hospital drive, but a slow-turning vehicle prevented it. He swerved his Jeep backward, shifted, and then turned, sharply veering around a slow car as a police siren blared behind him. Ignoring the siren, he floored the Jeep. He had to get to Johnny before Madison did. He didn't know what she was planning, but if she was wearing a disguise, then it was nothing good. She'd tried to kill him once, so what was to prevent her from finishing the job? When he reached the hospital entrance, he threw on the brakes, jumped from the Jeep, and presented his ranger badge to the officer before clearing the police vehicle. Upon seeing the badge, the officer became very serious. "What type of badge?" "Forest Ranger," Charlie answered without allowing the officer to finish his question. "I'm pretty sure there's a murder taking place right now." The officer's eyes grew large with concern. "I think my niece, Madison Kennedy, is about to finish off her husband." The officer swung his hand toward the hospital entrance, indicating to lead the way. "Madison Kennedy," the officer repeated as they ran. "There's a warrant out for her arrest." "Yes," Charlie verified. "I was leaving when I saw their vehicle in the parking lot." The officer pulled his weapon, but said nothing more. "Well, hello there, Johnny," Madison sneered. "I bet you didn't expect to see me here." She pulled a syringe from her pocket and removed the cap. The liquid inside was pink and appealing to the eye. "They left you all alone?" she chided. "How foolish of them." Johnny's eyes fluttered open, but his vision remained blurry. The pain meds he was given only minutes earlier had included a sleeping agent, which was doing an excellent job of anesthetizing his body. He tried to sit up when he heard her voice and saw the distorted syringe in her hands, but he could barely raise his upper body more than a few inches. His head flopped back down. "You sure are a hard one to kill," Madison continued. "This is antifreeze, by the way. They say it's a horrible way to go, but I figured, why not? He's earned it." Ava heard talking as she towel-dried her hair. She would have thought nothing about a female voice in a hospital full of nurses, but she immediately recognized the voice's loud, monotone aspect. She froze, listening more intently. "Yes," Teasel alerted, "it's Madison. She's here to finish the job." Ava's heart pounded wildly as she grabbed her underwear, slipped them on, and pulled her shirt over her head. She didn't have time for anything else. Madison pulled the cap off the IV catheter that was infusing Johnny with medication, then poked the needle syringe into it. "You know," she said, "I was going to tell you that it didn't need to be this way, that if you hadn't taken up with Jenny, I wouldn't be doing this." She started to push the antifreeze into the IV catheter tube. "But that would be a lie. Not that I haven't lied to you plenty." She snorted as she glanced at him. "I lie to you all the time. You're just too dumb to know it." She laughed. "I'm not sure that I can even count the number of men I've shared our bed with. That's why I didn't need you. I had them." "Why?" Johnny's weak voice questioned. He struggled to raise himself again, but she shoved his body down with minimal effort. The force and placement of her hand caused his wound to begin bleeding, but she didn't notice. "What did I do wrong?" he asked, his words coming out in slurred, frantic breaths. She regarded him like he had a third eye protruding from his face. "What do you mean by, what did I do wrong? You know what you did wrong. This is all your fault. You do this to me. You make me crazy. You've done it for years. How long did you think I'd put up with your She shook her head in wonder and waved her hand through the air. "I've done everything for you. What have you ever done for me?" "I don't understand," Johnny said, his statement more to himself than to her. The bewildered look on her face grew. "You don't understand?" she spewed. "Well, that just proves you're an idiot. So let me spell it out for you. All you care about is money. Everything is money. Money, money, money. You're a monster." She thrust her finger into his chest, causing his wound to burn with fire. "You repulse me," she continued, "and I don't care what Uncle Charlie says. You're not the victim here. I am." A tear trickled down Johnny's cheek. Nothing she said was accurate, yet there was no convincing her of that truth. She truly believed what she was saying. They lived in alternate realities, Madison's reality versus the real world. There was no doubt she was mental. He could not contrive any more excuses for her behavior. Still, her accusations sucked the life from his spirit. Blood began seeping through the wound's bandage, but this time the pain in his heart was far worse than the pain in his chest. Death would be a relief. He rested his head on the pillow and waited. If he was going to die, he was going to die. At this point, he didn't care. Madison squealed, irritated at how slowly the thick liquid was entering the IV catheter's tube. "Incidentally," she continued, "I raised your life-in policy last year to $5 million. Since you can't make enough money to take care of me properly while you're alive, I might as well profit from your death. That much will at least get me started until—" Ava's body knocked into Madison with such force that both women fell, tumbling into the monitoring equipment and knocking it over. Everything crashed against the wall, but the syringe filled with antifreeze was left dangling from the tube. "That poison's entering his system," Arden barked out. "It's not supposed to be this way." "Please, God," Johnny prayed. With Ava's life in danger, he had a new sense of urgency. "Please," he begged. He could hear Ava and Madison struggling beneath his bed, but could not help. He stretched his hand for the call button, but their tumble to the floor had effectively removed it from his reach. "Help!" he tried yelling, his voice barely audible. When Johnny's prayer was given, the angelic warrior's hands were no longer tied. Teasel placed his finger on the tip of the needle, preventing any additional poison from leaking into Johnny's system. With his other hand, he reached down and touched Ava's shoulder. She was exhausted from the previous 24 hours and was seriously disadvantaged owing to her lesser weight, but his touch revived her strength. Ava pulled her right knee between herself and Madison, then thrust forward, knocking her adversary off her body in a move that would make professional wrestlers proud. Madison's hand, wrapped around Ava's throat, was jerked loose with the action. She was livid. "You bitch!" Madison screamed. She grabbed Ava's hair and jerked her head backward, intending to knock her into the bed frame, but her hand rammed into something sharp, causing her to loosen her grip. Ava, in turn, grabbed Madison's hair while twisting to use her body weight, then crashed her face into the corner of the monitoring stand. Madison's elbow flew sideways, straight toward Ava's already bruised face, with such force that it would have caused serious damage. But the blinding blow was intercepted by a large hand that caught her elbow and jerked her body upward. "Not this time," Charlie barked out. He twisted Madison's body and thrust her against the wall, his weight pushing against her body. "Stay still," he demanded. "Get your hands off me," Madison screamed as she struggled against his grip. "How dare you touch me?" The police officer helped Ava to her feet. "Are you okay?" he asked. "It's in the line," she panicked. "She poisoned him." She ripped the tape from Johnny's hand and pulled out the IV catheter, watching as blood poured freely from the open wound. "Let it bleed. Maybe it'll bleed out some of the poison." Ava grabbed a piece of gauze from the floor and caught the blood as it leaked from the small incision. "Johnny," she nearly cried, "are you awake?" Johnny opened his eyes and stared at her. "Yes," he whispered. "She hurt me." He was barely conscious, but raised his hand and shoved the sheet off his wound. Blood was seeping through the bandage in abundance. "We need a doctor," Ava yelled toward the hall. The officer studied the IV tubing more carefully. "It's pink," he observed. "My guess is antifreeze. That's the easiest poison to obtain." He turned toward Madison as a nurse rushed past. "Is this antifreeze?" Madison smirked at him without answering. The nurse pulled the bandage off the wound and checked the sutures. Several of them were loosened by slicing through his skin, but everything else seemed fine. She glanced up at Ava. "I don't think it's anything serious," she stated. "It probably only needs to be sealed back up, but we'll have the doctor check it." "She put antifreeze in the line," Ava blurted out. "Or we think it's antifreeze. It's a poison of some kind, and it's pink." "Antifreeze," Johnny breathed out. "That's what she said." Madison twisted to try and free herself from her uncle's grasp, but it didn't work. "I said get your hands off me," she demanded in short, harsh words. "She's been having an affair with my husband. Look at what she's wearing. When I entered, she was trying to kill him because she didn't want anyone to know about the affair." Charlie stared at her in disbelief. "Is every word out of your mouth a lie?" "I'm the victim here," she screamed. "That jerk has been cheating on me for years. Let me go." "I don't suppose you've ever been a victim," Charlie contended. "But let me get this straight. You believe Johnny's having affairs with Jenny and Ava, both women he only met 3 days ago." "Yes," Madison agreed. "I always know when he's having an affair. I have a super intuition about these things. Besides, look at how she's dressed. That should be proof enough." Johnny groaned. "She was showering, Madison," he softly spoke. He looked at Charlie. "If I ever look at or even speak to a woman, she claims I'm having an affair with her. It's the same thing if a woman looks at me. It's been this way our entire marriage." "Are you a nun?" the officer asked Madison. "Of course not," Madison laughed. "Do you really think that I'm that stupid?" "Then why are you wearing a nun's habit?" I was," she swallowed hard. "There's a good reason for me to be wearing this ridiculous outfit, but it's none of your business. Are you going to let him keep me against this wall forever, or will you do your job and arrest him?" The officer pulled some handcuffs from his belt. "Finally," Madison said, twisting to face Charlie. "Now it's your turn to find out how it feels to be trapped, and if you don't let go of me immediately, I'll sue you for every penny you have." The officer snapped the first handcuff around her right wrist. "What do you think?" Madison began. "Shut up, Madison," Charlie ordered. "You're being arrested for attempted murder, twice, and if you keep fighting us, we'll add resisting arrest to the charges." "How dare you?" she fumed. "I'm the victim here, not him. I'm the victim." A second cuff snapped around her other wrist. "Madison Kennedy, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of—" "I told you that she was the one who tried to kill him, not me," she screamed. A second nurse hurried into the room. She stared at Charlie, the police officer tightening handcuffs around Madison's wrists while reciting the Miranda rights and the tumbled-over equipment. She poisoned him," Ava told the new nurse. "I took out the IV catheter so no additional poison would leak into his system, but I don't know what else to do." "How much was he given?" she asked. "I don't know." Ava's eyes welled with moisture. "I heard her voice from the bathroom. I don't think she was alone with him for much more than a minute." The nurse looked at the syringe poking into the tube. It doesn't take but a few seconds to push something through a syringe, but this thing's nearly full. Another nurse, followed by a security guard, rushed into the room. Sally, the older nurse instructed, get the doctor and bring me a microscopic slide. She turned toward the police officer. I need to get a sample of whatever's in that syringe so we can know for certain what we're dealing with. The officer nodded. Wear gloves to remove it from the tubing and touch it as little as possible. I only need a speck. If we're lucky, maybe the poison wasn't passing through the end of the needle. Antifreeze is a thick liquid to push through a small needle. She glanced at Madison, anger simmering just below the surface. You bought the smallest needle possible. Lucky for us. Maybe lucky for you, too.